First@Republic is simply about putting India first. It is about putting Indians first. It is about putting Indian interests first. It is also about putting Indian forces first. It is about putting the tricolor first. What does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on 730-4434-381 or upload it on your social media handle with the hashtag Nation First. We'll take some of your videos on air, and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Nation First means no considerations apart from putting India first. Nation First at Republic means chasing the story and telling it as the facts tell you it is before the nation. Nation First is confrontation to dig out the truth and put it before the nation. Nation First means questioning and demanding accountability so as to uphold democracy. What does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on 730-4434-381. or upload it on your own social media handle with the hashtag Nation First. We'll take some of your videos on air, and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise. Good evening and welcome, friends. This Sunday evening, the fact that you are watching this Sunday shows how seriously you take news and that commits us more to bring you the best. Let's start this Sunday debate with something which has been topical this entire week, and that's been Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. He's in fact capping it up with the second leg in Egypt and landing sometime tonight. But then it has already had its share of spotlight, arclights, and even controversy. Joining me, Shawan Sen.
Well, in fact, Abhishek, when it comes to Prime Minister Modi's US visit, there is a section which always calls his visit as irrational exuberance. Some say that it does not really realize in terms of deals, or for that matter, what really happens right now in India. There is a section, including the Western media, which still feels that this entire thing is a media creation resulting in no deliverables. Is that the case? What has really changed? Very few world leaders have had the opportunity to address the US Congress not once but twice. This goes in the same league like Nelson Mandela to Winston Churchill. Prime Minister Modi has now addressed the US Congress twice. And what does that address essentially mean? And in terms of not just India-US relation, but the roadmap for the global community. We take a look, a deep dive into India's foreign policy and that Modi touch to the foreign policy. What does it mean on the ground? That's the weekend debate tonight.
All right, let's do the debate. Democracy, diplomacy, diaspora. That's about both the United States and Egypt. Let's begin with the headlines now.
Prime Minister concludes an action-packed foreign visit with a visit to pyramids of Giza, set to return post-midnight.
High State Honor Order of Nile conferred on Prime Minister by Egypt. Several MOUs signed between India and Egypt.
Prime Minister Modi visits 11th century historic mosque in Cairo, meets Dawoodi Bohra community.
The major controversy over alleged pro-Aurangzeb sloganeering in Owaisi rally. BJP submits complaint. Fadnavis hits back.
Floods wreak havoc in Assam. Nearly 5 lakh people affected in 19 districts. Amit Shah dials Himanta, assures all possible assistance.
And last one, Belarus brokers peace between Russia and rebel Wagner Group. Troops retreat. Kremlin says won't prosecute Wagner Group chief Prigozhin.
Over the last few days, what we saw was not only about the pomp and pageantry linked to Prime Minister Modi's US visit, but also how exactly is India essentially viewed by the global community and the expectation that the world essentially has. Starting from the Russia-Ukraine war and what is India's position on this entire matter, Prime Minister Modi making it abundantly clear that India is not a neutral country but is on the side of peace. Then speaking about the Indo-Pacific stability and the concerns that they have. What has essentially happened, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a section which essentially believed that perhaps you could corner the government by saying that the track record of this government when it comes to minorities isn't that really good. And that's the reason why it would be a perfect opportunity to question this government as far as the alleged human rights violations are concerned. And the answer that came in from Prime Minister Modi was a razor-sharp response, saying that democracy is in our DNA. In fact, some here still say that this was whataboutery by the Prime Minister. Is that really so, Abhishek, given the fact that when the Prime Minister made the address before the US Congress, you've had congressmen lining up thereafter and taking autographs. And that's not just in terms of the optics. We've also seen deliverables, something that you've been reporting even before when the Prime Minister had gone in terms of the defense and technology collaboration. And that something we cannot brush under the carpet.
Well, absolutely. In fact, Shawan, since you mentioned about that press conference and Prime Minister's answer, without going into the antecedents of the journalist, she asked the question, but the Prime Minister really took it well and responded in quite some detail as he could on that occasion, given the fact that he had to also rush to the US Congress. But that's only a small part. I think US President, former President Barack Obama was essentially gaslighting, in a way embarrassing his own government, his own former deputy, now as President of the United States, Joe Biden, who in a way tackled the situation equally well. But then that's only one aspect of the whole thing. Back home, it seems Prime Minister has already sent a message through the US Congress address where he said it's good that you have such a vibrant democracy and you disagree and fight among each other on ideas and ideology, but when it comes to nation and presenting the picture outside, you are a united force, and that's how it should be, was the message to Rahul Gandhi. That's going to be another aspect. And then, of course, the deliverables. Irrespective of whatever the motivations of the United States, if there is a tide which India can capture and benefit its great mass of humanity, its citizenry, why not? Do people object to that? Or is it that they are not liking a bit the kind of limelight, the kind of arc lights, and the kind of focus that was there on Prime Minister personally? We'll discuss all that and more. Let's introduce the guests. Okay, let's look at a comprehensive story or package on Prime Minister's US visit, and then I introduce the guests.
The Prime Minister's state visit to Egypt deepened ties with the Muslim nation. He met the Grand Mufti of Egypt and also visited the Al Hakim Mosque.
Today I was honored, a lot, to meet His Excellency Prime Minister Modi, and it was a very nice and interesting meeting. The wise policies that are being adopted by Prime Minister Modi in bringing coexistence between the various factions, there in India. At the religious level, I must say that we have also, strong cooperation between us and India, and we are looking forward to further enhancing and deepening this cooperation in the future.
The entire visit speaks volumes for the close ties India has cultivated with Muslim dominant nations. And it comes days after this question was asked to him in the US.
Mr. Prime Minister, India has long prided itself as the world's largest democracy, but there are many human rights groups who say that your government has discriminated against religious minorities and sought to silence its critics.
मुझे आश्चर्य हो रहा है कि आप कह रहे हैं कि लोग कहते हैं नहीं, भारत डेमोक्रेसी है। भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। लोकतंत्र हमारा स्पिरिट है, लोकतंत्र हमारी रगों में है, लोकतंत्र को हम जीते हैं और हमने सिद्ध किया है डेमोक्रेसी कैन डिलीवर। और जब मैं डिलीवर कहता हूं तब कास्ट, क्रीड, रिलीजन, जेंडर, किसी भी भेदभाव को वहां जगह नहीं होती है। और जब हम लोकतंत्र की बात करते हैं तब अगर ह्यूमन वैल्यूज नहीं है, ह्यूमैनिटी नहीं है, ह्यूमन राइट्स नहीं है, फिर तो वो डेमोक्रेसी है ही नहीं। और इसलिए जब आप डेमोक्रेसी कहते हैं, जब डेमोक्रेसी को स्वीकार करते हैं और जब हम डेमोक्रेसी को लेकर के जीते हैं, तब डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का कोई सवाल ही नहीं उठता है। और इसलिए भारत सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास, उन मूलभूत सिद्धांतों को लेकर के, और इसलिए हम चलते हैं।
It's a fitting response to those like former US President Obama, who tried to raise questions on minority rights in India.
एक पूर्व राष्ट्रपति यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का बयान दे रहे हैं भारत के मुस्लिम्स, जबकि विदेश के विषय के बारे में मैं थोड़ा संयम रखते हुए बोल रही हूँ। यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के विषय में हम अच्छा फ्रेंडशिप चाहते हैं, मगर उधर से भी भारत के रिलीजियस टॉलरेंस के ऊपर एक USCIRF है, उनके कमेंट्स आ जाता है। राष्ट्रपति जी ने कुछ बातें बोल रहे हैं जहां शायद 6 देशों के खिलाफ, जहां मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन डोमिनेंट है, बॉम्बिंग हुई उन्हीं के कालों में।
And the pseudos within must read the tea leaves. Let's debate.
Okay, let's now introduce our very fantastic and balanced panel of guests, beginning with Ambassador Deepak Vohra, former diplomat. He's joining us live from Kolkata. We also have Ambassador Pradeep Kumar. He's former Secretary Minister of External Affairs, joins us live from Washington, D.C. We also have Sumant Raman, political analyst, live from Chennai. He leans with the Congress Party. Lokesh Jindal also leans with the Congress Party, political analyst, live from Nagpur. And Ashutosh Mishra, senior journalist, joining us via Skype. And let me begin with Brahma Chelani, author and professor, strategic studies, Center for Policy Research, and fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin. He's joining us live from Delhi, in fact. And the reason why I want to start with you, Mr. Chelani, is because we have to understand and put in perspective the overall geostrategic, geopolitical, and geoeconomic context behind Prime Minister's United States visit, and that and also to Egypt, which he has just concluded a couple of hours back. You think after these 5 days, India's diplomacy is brighter, India's visibility in the Committee of Nations is better, India's grip over its strategic direction is more focused, and what more you think has happened post these 5 days of Prime Minister's visit, particularly between India and the United States, and then of course the larger geopolitical import. Mr. Chelani.
Modi's visit to the US, of course, hogged the limelight. It drew a lot of international attention, while his visit to Egypt was low-key. But both these visits were quite successful in terms of the agenda that India had. And the US visit was also good for the Biden administration. But I think what comes out from these two visits is the fact that India aspires to great power status in its own right. It eschews explicit strategic alignment with any other great power because it believes it's a great power in its own right. Rather, India positions itself as a champion of the global South. So in an era of sharpening geopolitical competition, India is moving to secure what it sees as its rightful place on the world stage. And I think the trip to Washington and trip to Cairo both underscore these two aspects, that India is trying to secure what it sees as its rightful place on the world stage and also position itself as a champion of the global South, because closer cooperation and collaboration with Egypt will lend greater credence to India's leadership of the global South.
Well, in fact, let me also quickly go across to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, just to get us a sense of what is it like right now in Washington? Because if you really take a look at it, Abhishek, as far as the Western publications are also concerned, they also had to finally at least admit that there were key deliverables. And for all our viewers who are tuning in right now, let's understand that beyond the pomp and pageantry, as I was talking about, there have been certain successes. And what successes are we talking about? The jet engine joint production, ladies and gentlemen, for a very, very long time, India was actually seeking this very joint production. That has been taken care of. Second is with regards to the assembly of the high altitude, long endurance drones in India. And let's not forget the Artemis Accord. Ambassador Kapoor, these are certain deliverables, not just for the sake of it. The 58-page joint statement also essentially goes at length about various issues which for the longest time took us to try and thrash it out and get us on the same board. And today I think so that has been a bigger achievement, I would say, which something that people here or some within the lobby fail to really understand, that this is a work in progress. And finally, we are looking at a bit of a success at least.
Thank you very much for leading this discussion on this very important subject. When I view the situation from the ground in Washington, D.C., I see some very, very important developments. You have mentioned some of the points in the joint statement. There are many other points in the sense in all spheres and dimensions, whether they belong to the maritime domain, whether they belong to the space domain, whether they belong to the geostrategic domain, whether they belong to the human rights domain, democracy domain. There has been a very, very significant convergence of viewpoints with the most powerful nation on earth and the president, who's supposed to be the most powerful man on earth, coming out very categorically. So, as a person who has been involved in diplomacy for more than 40 years, I see this as a very great, significant paradigm shift in our relations and in the acknowledgement of India on the global stage, because you saw President Biden talking about democracy in India in unequivocal terms. Sitting here in Washington, I had been seeing a massive onslaught on the aspects of human rights and democracy by a lot of vested interests, such as the Islamic Jihadi groups, the Khalistani forces, all the groups funded by George Soros, many groups, academia and the media funded by China, the woke army, the Marxists, leftists, and the pseudo-liberals, who had been assaulting the administration with, tons of messages against the visit and about the record of India in this regard. But for President Biden to come out very confidently, and for the, floaters, the First Lady, Jill Biden, And the body language which existed, the chemistry which was there, the discussions which were held, clearly demonstrated that the leaders have decided to challenge these forces jointly, because there's a lot of coalition or coalescing of breaking America forces with the breaking India forces. In many cases, they are now similar. So the threat to the US is as severe as it is to India. And for both the leaders to decide to deal with it in a positive manner, but in a very strong, challenging manner, was one of the most important outcomes for the future. The media here, which
absolutely. Ambassador Kapoor.
Yes. Back to you.
Yeah, we understood, Ambassador Kapoor. You know, let me just pick up from where you're leaving and take it to Ambassador Deepak Vora as well. You know, of all the many deliverables and the takeaways that have come out of this visit, Ambassador Vora, I thought two were very interesting. One was withdrawing, both United States and India deciding to withdraw their respective disputes, 3 each from the World Trade Organization, and then focus on Open RAN, which is essentially something which would, once successful, this is a pilot project, once successful, would take out China out of the 5G, 6G rollout, not just in India, but maybe in about half the geography of the world. Even if the United States is resetting its ties with India, keeping China in mind, you think we should be riding the tide and absolutely take benefit in terms of our economy and trade of this reset in the United States thinking?
Thank you very much, sir. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on India's and the world's premier channel. Thank you. And the two of you who are anchoring it, you are outstanding in every which way. I'm 72 years old and I speak from the heart. You are very good. You used the term, sir, gaslighting. Not many people know what it means. It means a manipulation of a person's mind in order to create certain impressions. And you put it across very well. There are some armchair critics who've talked about the pomp and pageantry, the regard shown to Narendra Modi by President Joe Biden, his wife, the invitation to the Indian-American community in such large numbers to witness the formal arrival ceremony at the White House, the lightness of touch of Modi's dinner speech, his eloquent address to the joint session, which elicited many rounds of applause, the international resonance that Modi and India got with the yoga event organized at the UN headquarters, etc., etc. Sir, even if all this is choreographed, as our armchair warriors would have us believe, and intended to serve a political purpose, was the United States obligated to do all this? They haven't done it for too many people. Why for Narendra Modi? It doesn't detract from the substance of the visit. It could have been treated as any other state visit without the personal touch. Joe Biden was there whenever Modi was. He didn't go to Congress because constitutionally he cannot. But he was there. He was all over. It was, sir, if I may call it, the Modi-Biden show. And if you take the first part of the Prime Minister's Mo and add to it Joe's first name, it becomes Mojo, which is effectively, it means a political magical talisman. That's what it was all across. I returned from New York just a few days before the visit began. I had dinner with one of my oldest friends there, a senator, serving senator. And then he sent me a message. He said, Ambassador Deepak, now I understand. It's magic. It's Modi magic in America. That's what it's all about. These armchair critics can say what they want. They don't have an understanding, I'm afraid, of diplomacy or of what the United States seeks from us.
So 123 nuclear agreement, 2008 agreement, they have no role to play.
Lokesh, don't do that.
No, sir, I have a simple question to ask. Just one question to ask.
Lokesh, one second.
September
Lokesh,
2008,
one minute. Lokesh, we'll give the opportunity, please hold on.
What about the 123?
Lokesh, remember you're talking to experts that side, huh?
Let Ambassador Vora at least make his point.
Listen.
Lokesh, don't do that.
I have a simple question to ask.
We'll come to it.
No. I have
Lokesh, we'll come to it, I assure you. But don't do this. You know, the attempt that we are making right now in the weekend debate. One second, Lokesh.
No.
Listen
to me. I have a simple question to ask, sir.
No, one second. This is not a battlefield, first of all. Secondly, no, one second. Secondly, the idea. 1 minute, Lokesh. We are holding the show. We are holding the show. We have the right to go to our guests when we want to. 1 minute, Lokesh. Hold on. Let Ambassador Vora at least make his point. and then you will have enough time to rebut. But Ambassador Vohra, please complete your point.
Sir, all I wanted to say, just a little anecdote, that 530 years ago, a stupid European navigator came looking for India and found America. And this time the new Christopher Columbus went. And if I may reinterpret Julius Caesar, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. But this time he came, they saw, he conquered.
Sir, can I ask now?
Okay,
right.
let's now, Abhishek, look at the other side of it. Yes, Lokesh, we will come to you. But let me just quickly, 1 second, Lokesh. Let me also quickly bring in Sumansi Raman.
Give it to Lokesh.
Lokesh, perhaps you can take it. One aspect, Abhishek, which is striking, which perhaps has not really reflected very well, is the joint statement. And as far as the joint statement is concerned, I would like few points. Lokesh, why don't you respond? Because I'll also juxtapose this with the joint statement that came in previously, which had a very sketchy response to it. And for the longest time, whenever there has been an Indian Prime Minister going to United States of America, it has always been about Pakistan. But the references haven't really been as strong as it was this time in the joint statement, where you have a clear calling out of Pakistan, clear calling out as far as cross-border terrorism is concerned. And of course, that big statement that was made by President Biden as far as China is concerned. So now, Lokesh, please tell me that while you, your party and several other opposition leaders simply go on to say that, look here, this is all about tamasha, it's the diaspora which is sponsored by the Bharatiya Janata Party, that is the reason why this is the kind of response. But as Ambassador Vohra was also saying, few aren't really obligated to do what they've done. So why not really accept that?
See, I see these developments as a logical conclusion to what happened in the past. Since 2005, there has been various agreements. We had the 123 agreement, followed by September 2008, when there was a NSG waiver, which had set the ball in motion for stronger ties between India and US. And yes, following 2016, we saw now that India and US, they are having a strong strategic bilateral relationship coming on board. But the point is, the question that was asked by the press, it's not about the answer that the Prime Minister gave. Sawal ye uthta hai, sawal kyun utha? If I'm talking about India's legacy, we were the torch bearers for multiculturalism, pluralism. We were there to teach the world how to peacefully coexist. But then there were questions being asked to our Prime Minister.
Yes, sir.
Questions
Which
about
year
what?
you are talking about, Lokesh?
The protection
Which year?
of
1984?
minorities. No. I'm talking
Which year,
about
Lokesh?
this particular summit where the Prime Minister went to US.
1989, 1967, 1947,
Questioning
1910,
the rights of
1905. Which year, Lokesh?
a press
1885,
reporter asking
1857.
About the protection of minorities. Questions were being asked about India's plural secular character. That was something which was disappointing. As an Indian, I felt disappointed that my country's Prime Minister was subjected to such questions. Now I want to know, on what grounds is India witnessing a gradual erosion of its secular character? Is India undergoing a gradual transformation of the identity that was built carefully by Jawaharlal Nehru, the legacy of which is still India's foreign policy? Our foreign policy is still
when did India start losing its secular character, Lokesh? When did India become secular, by the way? When did India become secular, Lokesh? 1975?
India was
1975?
Since
you know what is the date today?
When we
did India become secular in 1986? When
we
under pressure from the mob on the streets, the government of that day changed law, overturned Supreme Court verdict. Did India become secular that day, Lokesh?
To the minorities and allowing the state
you're
to
not
make sure that
are you getting audio in your earpiece?
India becomes a secular nation.
Lokesh is not listening.
Implicitly, India was always a secular nation.
Lokesh is not even listening.
The constitution was secular.
Okay, when? 1975?
1950.
Since you always vouch for constitution, the constitution started reflecting word secular in 1975.
Sir, that was explicitly mentioned. But
no, in 1947 constitution, the word secular is not there.
If you read Article 25,
now you got caught.
You will understand what secular character was enshrined, was imbibed in the constitution.
No, Lokesh, this is unfair. Lokesh,
is
we
it
are having a
unfair?
conversation. We are
Yes,
having a
certainly we
conversation.
are.
You have been
Yes.
papering over some very deep questions I have been asking you. Let's do this question answer session, Lokesh. I
yes,
asked
please
you,
go ahead.
when did India become secular? The word secular was not there in 1947 Constitution. It came in 1975. You agree?
Yeah, it was the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act that you're talking that had inserted the word secular. I know that. But if you talk about
Okay,
the
now
implicit
next
character
question.
of our
Next
Constitution,
question.
it was secular.
Next question.
If you read the entire gist of the
Okay.
Constitution.
Okay. Understood. Understood. The secular character as reflected in the Constitution before 1975 was more about ethos
It is
of secularism
1976,
that
sir, you're
Indian
factually
society has
wrong.
practiced
42nd
since time immemorial.
Amendment
You
Act
agree?
was in 1976, not 1975. Get your facts right. It's 1976,
Yeah, 76,
not
okay.
1975.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, 76.
Okay.
Okay,
Now you
76.
can ask the next question.
Then, were we secular before that or not? If yes, was
Yes,
it because
yes,
of
we
our
were.
secular ethos as a society? And if yes,
No,
don't they predate even 1947? Don't they go back
If
to
you-
millennia and the way society has practiced secularism, practiced tolerance, practiced harmony and coexistence? Is it not a civilizational
Politically,
ethos?
The essence of secularism that I'm talking about, that's political secularism. That was something that was enshrined in our polity post 1950. If you're talking about secularism as an aspect within the society, its dimensions underwent a gradual change over a period of time. And when you're talking about India,
Ek baat,
the
ek,
idea
I am
of
not
India,
able to
its
understand.
secular character.
I am
as
not
a
able to
nation
understand.
state.
Sumant Raman. Okay, Lokesh, you got your say. Sumant Raman, is Prime Minister's visit, and I'll come back to the ambassadors and I'll come back to Brahmachalani also again to take a deep dive on the diplomatic aspects, the takeaways and the important successes that have been marked in this visit. Sumant Raman, but absolutely planned Obama interview, a question which the journalist of course is entitled to, which the Prime Minister ably handled. Should that really overshadow every other achievement that this visit has made? Remember, it's about India. If millions of jobs are getting created because the Americans want to shift their manufacturing base to India, if our defense forces are going to get the most cutting edge technology to tackle terror and any offensive designs on India's territory on any side of our border, should that not be important? Should we just focus on one question asked by some journalists randomly in the backdrop of I'll come to Obama also, by the way, but then you think the opposition is doing injustice to India's cause in just targeting the Prime Minister?
Abhishek, I've been very patiently listening for the last half an hour, so I presume you will give me at least a minute. First of all, the answer was not directly related to the question. The question clearly was, what are the steps that the government is taking to to enhance the inclusiveness, especially with regards to the Muslim community. That was really basically what the question was, and the answer was a bit about a democracy and how India has been a thriving democracy and so on, which is not really the answer to the question. Let's ignore that. Former President Obama has now joined the long list of those out to destabilize India, anti-nationals, toolkit members, and so on. So it's actually interesting that such a distinguished person is now a member of this brigade, as you would call. I mean, I don't know whether you would refer to him as part of the Khan Market gang, etc., etc. But basically, I think President Obama is a pretty distinguished person to have in that group. The point we have to understand is we have to ask ourselves a question when we see incidents happening every other day in different parts of the country, when we see unbridled hate speech online, and it should not take a President Obama to tell us that, or somebody from sitting in America to tell us that. We should do the introspection. Unfortunately, we have crossed that stage a long time ago, and we feel that anybody saying anything critical of the government is anti-national, is against the interests of India, is plotting to destabilize the country, and therefore is an enemy of the state. That does not happen in a democracy, to the best of my knowledge. That happens in dictatorships and authoritarian regimes, right? So the day we start to look inward and ask ourselves these questions, rather than start to get irritated every time somebody abroad has to point it out. When people here have pointed out the same thing, they've been called anti-national, they've been called toolkit members, they've been called Lutyens gang, they've been called all kinds of names. Now, why when Obama says it, why do we get so worked up about it? Obama has praised Prime Minister Modi in the past. He has called Prime Minister Modi a good friend in the past. We never had a problem with all those. Obama was a good guy then. Now Obama has become a bad guy. Come on, Abhishek. I think we have to grow up. A mature democracy is all about being able to look inward and actually taking steps to improve ourselves and governance without having to have foreign leaders pontificate to us.
No, Mr. Raman, I just want, role reversal here. Imagine a situation if a former Prime Minister of our country starts lecturing the United States of America, and we'll see how they essentially respond. When it comes to their track record, and Ambassador Kapoor, who's there in the United States of America, will actually tell you how the Americans have essentially responded time and again when they were criticized, one, because of that botched up withdrawal from Afghanistan. Then you've had the treatment of Muslims in the United States of America post 9/11. Sumansi Raman, those who've actually been there, those who've actually covered these incidents, let's be very clear that the track record of the United States of America is certainly not worth emulating. One minute. I am not. Sumansi Raman, let's get the perspective from a person who's there in the United States of America, and he'll be able to tell you that the track record of the United States of America when it comes to human rights violations perhaps is worse than several other countries, and the list is actually longer. Ambassador Kapoor, why don't you put this into perspective, that this entire bogey of human rights violations that they essentially talk about, and the penchant that the United States of America has had for lecturing other nations, the only difference today is that we are now talking as equals. For the longest time we weren't, and that's the reason why few are still not being able to digest. Surely you can question the Indian government when it comes to various issues, but on a platform like this, perhaps the focus should be on what are we really achieving and whether we are talking as equals or not.
Well, thank you very much. What I'd like to do is not really get into the domestic politics of India or the domestic politics of the USA, but look at it in a neutral fashion as a professional who's been working in different continents of the world with different leaders. And to your specific question about the track record here, there are two things which I'd like to mention definitely. One is that, yes, there have been very significant, violations of human rights, which have been happening for the last few centuries against the ethnic nationalities here, against what they call the Red Indians, who were decimated through weapons and war and germs and so many other it was a genocide, which they say. Then there was very grave violations of the human rights of the African Americans, who were treated as slaves for a very long time. And even today, if I scan the horizon, the amount of gun violence which is happening in the US on a daily basis. There are over 1,000 cases of gun violence which has happened between January and today, this year itself. And when we talk about gun violence, the definition is not something which is just one person being shot or killed. It is when more than 4 people are killed or injured seriously. Then they listed in this list of gun violence. So to have over 1,000 instances of gun violence in a short period of a few months is also a very severe attack on the individual and the safety of the individual. Now, there is Also, the aspect of, if I scan all the jails and the convicts and the prisoners today all over USA, there's hardly any Hindu amongst them who's in the jails in the USA. So the regard for the Hindu American community is very, very high because they are law-abiding. They are committed to the nation, to the laws and the rules and the regulations. So this is what I'd like to say about the US. But notwithstanding that, if I have to analyze the visit in perspective, 99.9% of the visit dealt with positives, dealt with the future, dealt with the US-India relations, dealt with the world, dealt with how to strengthen and foster these relations in a very positive way in all dimensions and domains and spheres. Dealt with how this will impact the economies in the two countries, job creation, etc. Dealt with also the aspect of how it will benefit the world at large. Now, I see it from a positive perspective, from that point of view, that it was a very good visit in the benefit of India's future, in the benefit of US future, in the benefit of world's future, in the benefit of common citizens of the world. So definitely, I have dealt with many prime ministers' visits and other visits in different countries. So I would give it very high marks in terms of the outcomes. Thank you.
Let me bring in Ashutosh Mishra right now. Ashutosh, the question here is not about perhaps only being cheerleaders. No one is expecting anyone to be a cheerleader. But keeping the nation first has to be an objective not just for the Prime Minister but for every citizen. Now, the Western publications suddenly seem to be, rather than really focusing on the fact that one, it is the deals have actually created jobs not just here in India, but has actually made jobs creation in the United States of America. The Western publication then started looking into something like what many of you are now basically talking about. Let's take a look at the track record of the Indian government. The fact of the matter is that even in that response that came in from the Prime Minister, which many would say, some of you are now dumbing it as whataboutery, the reality is that it is about the Constitution, and that's exactly what he said as a response, that nothing is above the Constitution. His government is not above the Constitution.
So, Shravan, you, before the ambassador was speaking, you raised a very important... Yeah, so Shravan, before the ambassador was speaking, you raised a very important point, that how would it look if an Indian Prime Minister said bad things about, or an ex-Prime Minister spoke badly about USA. You have to realize that this visit has to be seen in two perspectives. One, as the Prime Minister of India, and the other as that of Narendra Modi. Even Secretary Blinken and the US State Department has twice in recent past said things about human relations, human rights in India being bad. I mean, they have gone as far as saying that India, there is targeted killings of minorities, and there can be genocide. It has been said by the same State Department of Joe Biden. So you have to see that Biden and US actually don't give a damn about human rights and democracy in India. They are more interested in the business deals that they are getting, which you have rightly pointed out. And it's a give and take. India has given. Now their apple growers are happy that the $100 million India market has been opened for US again. And similarly, as Prime Minister Modi himself said, that a single aircraft deal from India gives more than 1 million jobs to Americans. So that's a give and take. That's something separately. And India has been a leader of non-aligned movements right from Jawaharlal Nehru's time. So it's not that it's the first time that we are getting this importance in the world. Now, why we take it so badly when Obama, when he's actually addressing a meeting on, or rather a talk on state of democracy in US, and there a question is raised, and in India we try to turn it into something of Obama actually attacking India specifically, is because Narendra Modi uses these foreign visits to burnish his local image. He tries to give an impression to his bhakts in India and in diaspora that is very popular.
Should he use his foreign visits to burnish Rahul Gandhi's image, by the way?
Burnish India's image. when as an individual, as an Indian, he brings shame to India.
That's obviously happening because the kind of deals that are taking place. That's obviously happening because the kind of honors Prime Minister gets. It's India's image. Obviously, it's not for the Prime Minister, it's for the country he represents.
If he is put on a par with MBS, when the State Department says that the Saudi prince has been given immunity because Narendra Modi, who was involved in Gujarat riots, has been given immunity as Prime Minister of India, it's a matter of shame for us Indians that this is happening. So let's not mix two things up. It's a success for India, but yes, Modi stands exposed.
Okay. No. Ashutosh, you have to compare apples, not apples and oranges. But since twice I have heard the name of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and his visit to the US mentioned, I believe once by Lokesh and the next time by Ashutosh. I'm just reading from Bruce Riedel's book, which is JFK's Forgotten Crisis, Tibet, the CIA and the Sino-Indian War. Just the quotes. Listen, Ashutosh and Lokesh. According to another account, Nehru was much more interested in Pat Kennedy, JFK's attractive 27-year-old sister, than in either Jack or Bobby. Kennedy told Galbraith it was the worst state visit of his presidency and also felt that Nehru seemed more interested in talking with Jackie than with him. Nehru, who's deeply in love and has a picture of himself strolling with JBK displayed all by itself in the main entrance hall of his house, is entirely agreeable.
Are we going to simply have sensational literature, some form of a sensational
This is geopolitics. Bruce Riedel was a top diplomat of the United States. It's a book written on geopolitics. The book's name is JFK's Forgotten Crisis, Tibet, CIA and Sino-Indian War. How do I help you, Lokesh, if that diplomat, while writing about Sino-Indian War and Tibet and China, is mentioning about Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's interest in Jackie?
I think the Ambassador Vora would...
the Rajiv Reagan meet?
Lokesh,
in the Rajiv Reagan meet, President Reagan was holding the umbrella.
No, 1 second. That's well.
Okay, but let's make it serious. Let's make it serious.
I know that's as serious as it can get.
Unlike Obama, I was not gaslighting. I was just reading from a book. Okay, come back to Obama. Come back to Obama. And I have to go to Professor Bama Chalani as well. But you see, I'm just clearing out the Obama thing before we move on to the more substantive part of the conversation in the last 10 minutes. Barack Obama became President of the United States in 2008. When he became lame duck in 2016, that is the first time he has visited a mosque, Sumant Raman, in Baltimore. And that's in the last year of his presidency. He went to the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, by the way, where Prime Minister was today, and visited the Al-Hakim Mosque. And he lectured the Muslim community of the world on Al-Qaeda. He lectured the Palestinians to not indulge in violence. He mentioned 9/11 6 or 7 times. And then he said something which perhaps no Indian leader, including Prime Minister Modi, would say. He said, among some Muslims, there's a disturbing tendency to measure one's own faith by the by the rejection of somebody else's faith. Now, Sumant Raman, Obama, when it comes to his own country, is a true patriot. He can hold the mirror. Speaking from Al-Azhar University and not bothering to go to any mosque all his entire 8 years, except for, I mentioned, in February of 2016 to the Baltimore Mosque. Muslims constitute just 1% of the US population. Sumant Raman, this is really unfair on the Prime Minister that when he's focusing on India, he's focusing on making India or taking India to the next level in terms of its trajectory of growth. You're just holding on to one question asked by a journalist. I'm not questioning the intention, motivation whatsoever. Any journalist is entitled to ask questions. The Prime Minister handled that. I'm saying please move on. For God's sake, focus on the benefits that have come out of the visit.
Why don't you tell us more about the intention or the motivation, since this is the third time in the show you said...
I am saying no, I am not bothered about them. I said the journalist is entitled to ask a question. No, I am not. I did not say that. I said she is entitled to ask the question. She got an answer as well. Move on.
Who is not moving on?
Okay.
No, who is not moving on? Who is dragging Obama in finding out.
Okay, fine. Okay. If you have agreed, fine. Good enough. Good enough. Thank you so much. Good enough. Good enough. Now let me.
The fact was, the visit was.
The digression came from Lokesh. It went to Ashutosh. Thank you so much, Sumant Raman, to say, okay, fine, we are done with it.
The question was not answered. Why were more questions not taken? Why was just one question taken from the media? Normally, leaders take multiple questions from the media.
That was the format. That was the format. Because that was the format, Sumant Raman. That's the format typically. I am a journalist. I know you have not covered these press conferences. Typically, either you ask one question each or you ask two questions each. That's how the format is, and that's what was followed. For God's sake, please don't digress. Now let me get the conversation back on track.
That always at press conferences only one question is taken. Please ask him. He's an expert. Ask him to say
one or two for the time constraint. Sumant Raman, I have covered these press conferences for the last 10 years, and that's the format. Please, for God's sake, don't take my job. Don't interfere in what I know best about my job. Okay, moving on. Brahma Chelani, Professor Chelani.
You got it wrong.
No, you have said, Sumant Raman, you have said that you are moving on. You are not making any sort of it. So let the matter rest there.
Is the diplomatic visit, 1 minute, Sumant Raman, Professor Chelani, I'll bring him in right now. Sumant Raman, can the entire diplomatic visit of the Prime Minister be reduced to just one single press conference?
No.
You may want to ask him 5 questions.
You are doing
the protocol may not allow. But having said that, once again, I said, why are we only focusing on the press conference? Professor Chelani, let's come back to it.
Why did Himanta Biswa Sarma
of course, you may see. Once again,
why did Himanta Biswa
Sumant Raman, no problem. Why don't you send a proposal to the Prime Minister's office? 1 minute.
Oh, it was.
The entire opposition can send in. Why don't you all send a proposal to the Prime Minister's office? Say that you want to do a town hall with him.
No,
that's
Mr.
not
Raman
the job here. The question here is about the visit that has happened. We're talking about the official state visit.
There's not been a press conference in 9 years.
Professor Chelani.
Professor Chelani, can I just 1 minute? Sumant, you've had the chance. Let's just quickly go back to Professor Chelani also. Professor Chelani, the point here is that there seems to be a lot of focus essentially on what the press conference was all about. Having said that, the answers were taken. In fact, President Biden makes a very clear statement. And I think so. I want to focus on just a little bit also on that straight batting that was done by President Biden as far as US-China relations are concerned. And Professor Chelani, what I find extremely remarkable here is that he's been able to bring out a clear distinction and why he says that India-US relation and US-China relation cannot be spoken in the same breath. And that's a clear distinction right now. Would you say that this is a convergence of strategic interest and a need right now that the United States of America has, or for that matter, this is a culmination of what has been going on for a very long time as far as India-US relations are concerned?
Also, Professor Chelani, if I could just add before you answer, there was a time when China and United States also were perhaps similarly placed. When the United States was looking for a shop floor of the world, they perhaps had strategic interest in weaning away China from Russia, which they successfully did for some time at least. Of course, that period is over, long past. So much water through Potomac, off Potomac. Now, but look at the way Chinese have conducted themselves over the last 3 decades. I have seen, when I visited China a couple of times, the manner in which they have changed their names from Chinese Mandarin names to English Anglo-Saxon names, just to sort of be in sync with the visiting business corporate community and the guests and the tourists. The manner in which China agreed on many strategic objectives of the United States, for example, in the Middle East. The manner in which one could say the Chinese actually stooped to conquer. Now, if our moment has come when the coming together of geostrategic and geopolitical objectives of the West put us in a situation where we could be becoming that place from where over the next few years 10%, 15% of global trade originates, why not grab the opportunity with both hands as a united nation? As a nation united?
Well, I agree. China is a key driver of the growing strategic convergence of US and Indian interests. But I think we should also be concerned about this narrative that there's democratic backsliding in India. This narrative is gaining traction in the world. Why is this narrative gaining traction? Because it undermines India's credentials as the world's largest democracy. And we have to answer that question squarely without bringing in domestic politics. There is geopolitics involved behind this narrative. Right. Biden took office after criticizing India on Kashmir and the Citizenship Amendment Act. In his campaign document, he had criticisms of India on these two issues. But after he took office, his administration took a very balanced view. For example, his Secretary of State, Blinken, when he came to New Delhi 2 years ago, he said on Indian soil that both of our democracies are works in progress. That put it very well. After all, no democracy is perfect. Every democracy is a work in progress. And both the US and India have issues regarding various aspects of their democracy. But then the moment India took an independent stance on the Ukraine war issue, the US government's approach changed. For example, when India and the US had a 2+2 meeting in Washington last year, and then the foreign and defense ministers held a joint news conference in Washington, Blinken took a swipe at India. The same Blinken who said both of our democracies are works in progress, he took a swipe at India, alleging, quote unquote, a rise in human rights abuses in India. Now, there is clearly an effort by the Biden administration to use human rights issues as leverage against India. And I think what is also compounding the situation is the fact that just as Trump was criticized while in office by his critics, that he's a wannabe dictator, that he's undermining American democracy, that he's pursuing an anti-Muslim agenda. Similarly, critics of Modi at home and abroad are trying to paint him in the same light. Because the fact is that, like the US, India is politically polarized. Also, to some extent, the Modi government's communication skills from the very beginning have not been great. They have not, that the government of India has not set the record straight on some critical issues. But so I think it's important for us to start addressing this issue. This narrative should not gain further traction. But on the larger issue that you asked me, as the White House's Asia policy czar, Kurt Campbell, has acknowledged, India has a unique strategic character and a desire to be an independent, powerful state. Far from being a US client, India will be another great power, in the words of Kurt Campbell. And US policymakers understand.
India is, of course, going to be a great power in some time to come. And the Prime Minister, with his US visit, Professor Brahmachelani, has set the ball rolling. He's been doing that for some years. And whatever politicization is happening, we'll continue to debate that over the next week, because Prime Minister is arriving midnight. And the next week is going to be the one where we are going to continue to discuss this story. I would say we are running out of time. That's why thank you so much to the ambassadors, to Professor Chellani, to, of course, Ashutosh and Sumant Raman, of course, Lokesh as well. Thank you so much. We're back tomorrow at 9 p.m. with Arnab Goswami and the debate.
An ideal platform where minds meet and ideas collide. A dialogue that explores views and opinions that interests the nation. After the resounding success in Pune, we are raising the bar even higher. Featuring renowned experts from medicine, technology and policy domains. Republic Dialogue, a thought leadership series. An ideal platform where minds meet and ideas collide. A dialogue that explores views and opinions that interests the nation. After the resounding success in Pune, we are raising the bar even higher. Featuring renowned experts from medicine, technology and policy domains. Republic Dialogue, a thought leadership series. An ideal platform where minds meet and ideas collide. A dialogue that explores views and opinions that interests the nation. After the resounding success in Pune, we are raising the bar even higher. Featuring renowned experts from medicine, technology and policy domains. Republic Dialogue, a thought leadership series. An ideal platform where minds meet and ideas collide. A dialogue that explores views and opinions that interests the nation. After the resounding success in Pune, we are raising the bar even higher. Featuring renowned experts from medicine, technology and policy domains. Republic Dialogue, a thought leadership series. An ideal platform where minds meet and ideas collide.